Hi everyone, it's Shauna from Shwin&Shwin and Shwin Designs. And today on Sewing with Shwin, I am going to tackle one of the questions I get asked all the time. And that is about my quilt appliques. And the question is, how do you do that? So, how do I do that? The one trick I will highly recommend is freezer paper. This, my friends, is the secret to my applique quilting and to most things I do. It's paper on one side, shiny on the other, and when you iron it onto fabric, it sticks in place, but not permanently. You can still rip it off as we do, but it sticks in place while you're working with it, and that is what makes everything so much easier. So when I get asked, can I use regular paper? Can I use whatever? You can use whatever you want. I just love myself enough to use something that's not gonna drive me crazy, so I use freezer paper. But you, do you. Today we are going to make this unicorn quilt. Oh. And the template for this unicorn quilt is available in my shop. I will link that below. I also have a number of free templates on my website, so if you're just getting your feet wet or want to try out this process and see what you think, you can give it a go with a free template. There are those linked below as well. And I have other templates in my shop because I'm kind of addicted to this whole process. Let's go ahead and just dive right in, shall we?
So you're going to grab your pattern and you're going to cut off the side and the bottom of each of the pieces. This just makes taping it together so much easier. And a lot of people complain about PDF patterns. I, for one, love them. Obviously, it's part of my business. But I also just find they go together so easily and so quickly, and I love that I can just print them right at home. So that's my whole little spiel for them. But I go row by row, and then I tape all the rows together, and it's just done so quickly and easily. And then we're going to trace it. So grab your freezer paper and put the shiny side down. For this one, I did need another additional little scrap that I'm going to tape together here just so that I can fit the whole unicorn body onto the pieces of paper. And we're going to trace. And to trace it off, I do need the whole body to be one because I'm going to cut that all out of one piece of fabric. But for the rest of them, if I need to move the paper around as I'm tracing them off, and if you need to too, that's totally fine because all these pieces are going to be cut out anyway. So the only other thing I keep in mind when I'm tracing them off is if a piece is going to go under another piece. So like for example with this leg, I'm adding little arrows here because this part of the leg is going to tuck under the body when it's sewn on. And so I just like to mark any areas that are going to be tucked under. It saves me work in the long run. So as I continue going through here, I label every edge that's going to go under another edge. It just means that when you're folding all the edges under, any edge that has an arrow on it or a marking, as I've done, I don't have to fold under or worry about. So it can be cut a little bit longer and it's totally fine. It's just going to get tucked under. The other thing I do keep in mind when I'm tracing, and it would be wise for you to as well, is labeling your pieces. You can do this however you want. I usually just use numbers, but you can use colors or fabric or patterns or whatever you want to do because once these pieces are all cut out, they are all going to look remarkably the same. And it's enough of a puzzle trying to put this all back together that I like to make my life as easy as possible and just label all my pieces. So I label the pieces and I label the pattern with whatever code I use. So in this case, I use numbers. I labeled those same numbers on my pattern. It makes life a lot easier. I'm going to continue to trace all of these pieces off, all the elements, and then I'm going to cut them all out. And my filming does get cut off here in a second, so you don't see that entire process, but really it's tracing, labeling, cutting. I believe in you. Okay, now that we have all of our pieces cut out, we're ready to iron it onto the fabric. We are going to be ironing onto the wrong side of the fabric, which as you can see with this fabric, there's no clear right or wrong side, but one side's a little shinier than the other, so I'm going to call that my right side, and the other side will be my wrong side. So the first thing to do here is to give it a little press to get out any iron or wrinkles or anything. I get mine out of the scrap bin, so there's almost always wrinkles. The other thing I'm doing super fast motion here is just organizing all my pieces. It's smart to do so that I have a pile of my hair, my mane, and pile of my tail, all that. I should have done it before, I didn't. So we're gonna iron these pieces down now, and when you're ironing it down, you're doing shiny sides, shiny side down to the fabric, and you're just gonna apply heat. Some fabrics do require a little bit more heat or a little bit longer before they'll really stick down. Some stick right away. Like felt, I never have a problem. It sticks right away. With this sateen cotton or whatever it is, as you can see, it kind of was peeling up a little still at the edge, and I don't want this sucker to go anywhere when I'm sewing. So I just give it a little bit more heat and then it sticks really well, and I don't have any problems with it. I've never met a fabric it just doesn't stick to. So the only other thing to consider when you're ironing your pieces down is you do need some space between the pieces, because you're going to be cutting these out, leaving a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch around each piece. So other than that, we're just ironing all the pieces down to the fabric, and we will cut them out next. Okay, I'm going to slow it down just a little bit right here because we are doing the felt pieces now. And as you can see, I am not leaving as much space here. You don't have to with felt. You're going to cut those out as the shapes that they are, so you don't need to leave extra space around them. And then the other thing here is with my unicorn body here, I was using this piece of fabric which I was committed to making it fit on there, and you will be able to tell as we get down that there is a little spot by his leg that I didn't actually leave enough fabric to tuck under it. It's my quilt and I'm just gonna make it work because it's who I am, but you can kind of adjust the pattern if needed for that reason. Okay, so next we are going to cut out all the pieces. And again, like I said, you're just cutting out with anywhere from a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Honestly, it can even be more, it doesn't really matter, around each piece. And then the only thing I'm gonna do is show you one thing here. We're gonna slow it down a little, because when you're dealing with corners or curves, you need to cut into the fabric, but not through your paper, just to your paper, a little slit, just like you do with any sewing project. And this is so that when you fold that fabric, it folds over as it should around those curves. So you can do multiple lines here, like I am doing lots of slashes there. Yeah, technical difficulties here. I swear I will get my act together. Moving on. It's super blurry now, and it took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize I was not in focus. Again, total newbie here. I'll get better, I promise, but until then, I'm just going super fast through this until I realize that I was out of focus. Ah, that's so much better. Okay, so what we're doing here is we are folding the fabric over the pieces now. I use spray starch because that helps me get a nice crisp edge. And you are literally just tucking the fabric right up to the paper edge. Careful though, the iron is hot, it will burn. I know, it hurts. So we're just gonna keep pressing it literally right along that fabric edge. This is why it's so nice that the paper doesn't move. And we're gonna do that to every single piece that we cut out. I know I don't have a lot of it shown in my footage because it was either blurry or I had some technical difficulties, but I think you'll get the idea here. You just want a nice, crisp edge. Okay, Okay, so I wanted to show you here the felt pieces cut out as are. There's nothing folded under there. And then here where I marked with my arrow, I didn't have to fold under there, so I just left it. Okay, so next we're gonna take this background fabric and I'm just gonna iron out some of the creases because we want it to be nice and flat. And we're gonna start putting our puzzle, if you will, back together. So we have all of our lovely pieces. Starting with the body, you remove the paper, get rid of that. And again, just kind of retuck any edges under. Position this body wherever you really want on the fabric. I kind of try to center it a little bit, but I don't get too technical here. And it's gonna take a lot of pins. I pin like crazy, you guys. So then with the other pieces, I kind of follow the pattern template, but it's reversed now because of the way we make this. And so you can't really follow it exactly. I know that might drive some people crazy, but I kind of eyeball it. All of your pieces were traced off that, so it's gonna go together pretty well. And here's the place where sometimes it gets really fiddly and you will sit and fiddle forever. Guys, this took me an embarrassing amount of time to get this little corner to behave in the way I wanted it to because the hoof tucked under both leg pieces. And sometimes it's just that way, you guys. The struggle can be so real sometimes, but good news is I finally got it to do what I wanted it to do here, and everything tucked under nicely and behaved and played well, so we could move on from this. When it comes to the hair pieces, because they're all kind of stacked, if you will, in the way that they go together, I usually start at the top and work my way down. And again, I use the template as my guide for where these should be placed, but it's not exact. I just know how they should be lined up when they're done. The fast motion pinning, wouldn't it be nice if we could really move this quickly? Okay, we're ready to sew this thing. I use this edging foot. I think that's what it's called. I don't know. Don't hold me by this. Sorry, Bernina. It has this little line which allows me to guide right along the edge and sew right along the edge, which is why I think it's called the edging foot. I don't know. I used to use the applique foot, which is just an open foot, but I didn't like the precision and this just lets me sew literally right along the edge, which is what I want. The other thing is sometimes I am really ambitious and I switch my colors for every color that I'm sewing. So I would be switching between the light gray and the dark gray and then all the colors of this tail and all that. I did not this time. I went with straight white to edge stitch all my pieces down. Honestly, I kind of feel like the white thread just disappears anyway, but if you really want that extra detail and that extra time, go ahead and change your colors out every single time. Otherwise, all we're doing is sewing down every single edge. And when I'm going through the tail parts, I do double over myself again, just so that I can always stick to the same side of the edge that I want to, and I don't have to start and stop my foot again. I like the fluid motion, but only other tip I would say is that when you get to a tip or a corner, I will backstitch a time or two over it just so that I make sure I get the entire corner secured. And once I've sewn around the whole body and the hair, I go through and just sew up any last holes and sew on the little details. Okay, now we're going to draw on the little eye. I use just a pencil for this. You can trace it or you can freehand it. This is also the point in the movie where I thought my camera was nice and secure and then it just dropped. That happened. That explosion has been brought to you by my good friend Erin Marvel, who believes that all videos are better with an explosion in them. Moving on. To stitch on the eye, I use black embroidery floss for this, and I do what's called a whipped back stitch. To do that, you're just doing a regular old back stitch here, like I'm kind of doing, but look like I'm struggling at. And after the whole thing is stitched, then I go through and you wrap the thread around each stitch. And that's what gives it more of a solid look when it's done, which is what I prefer. So it's pretty easy, but it takes a little bit of time. Okay, on with the quilting. Shocker, I'm just going to quilt straight lines. It's the easiest, you guys, and it's just so quick. I start at the top and sew down. I don't pivot and turn anymore because then you can get directional lines and nobody wants that. I also just use regular white thread. It disappears into it, looks nice. You can get creative if you want. Okay, so once it's all quilted, I am folding it into fourths, smoothing everything out, making sure everything's flat and even because we are going to trim up the sides. So I usually find the narrowest part and trim it all to meet that. And when I turned it to the side to do that, I realized that trimming it to the narrowest part was going to trim off some of the foot, and I did not want that. So I'm trimming the top and the bottom separately, but again, just to the narrowest side. It just needs to be even. You don't need to spend a lot of time making precision here. And then I round off my corners, and I do this just because I find binding a quilt with rounded corners so much easier than having to worry about mitered corners.
Okay, so we have made the unicorn quilt, you guys. The only thing I didn't show you, obviously, in the video is the binding of the quilt. Maybe that will be another video for another day. I'd like to say there was a reason I didn't include it in this video, but really I just kind of did the binding and didn't worry about it. Also, camera fell. There were some issues. I have a lot of issues. I'm gonna work on it and get a little bit better at this. I promise this is not my first rodeo. I have made videos before. You can see them on my channel, but they're not very good, and I am trying to get better at this for you, for me, for all of us involved. So if you would like, you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Thanks, we'll see you next time. Bye.